Chief Rabbi Mervis, Rabbi Lawrence, my host, the stars of tonight, Bnei Akiva, Chanichim, Madrichim, Vebogrim. As a Bnei Akiva graduate, I'm a little bit biased. The wonderful, wonderful, wonderful community that gathered together every year to celebrate Israel's independence. And this year, especially, as we celebrate 75 years of marvelous achievements of a young country that carries 3,000 years of history. How many of you have been to the residence in 58 Avenue Road? If you've been to the residence, raise your hand. We need to work on the young generation. They haven't been to the residence. So to those of you who haven't been to the residence, when you walk into the drawing room, on the fireplace, there is a nice painting of Jerusalem, and it was painted by a very famous man. His name was Winston Churchill. Churchill painted Jerusalem at 1921 when he visited Israel. And you can see there Har HaTzofim, the beautiful Har HaTzofim, the place where Maayan, my eldest, was born, the place where so many songs were written on. But when you see the painting of Churchill, Jerusalem looks quite empty. Not too many Jews lived in Jerusalem back then. And I know this community, and I know many of you spent last Passover in Jerusalem. It's a totally different world, isn't it? Jerusalem is back to life. So many people live in Jerusalem, so many new neighborhoods. Such a beautiful city, back to life. And when I look at this painting every single day, because I usually host people at the embassy and events taking place at this very specific place of the residence, and this is the claim to fame of the house, so I show everyone the Churchill, I think about a dear friend of mine that I'm going to tell you his story now. And for me, this is my story for Yom Ha'atzmaut. So my friend's name is Uri Elitzur. I doubt if any of you read things he wrote, but he was a brilliant writer. He was a very famous journalist, and he was an editor of a famous newspaper in Israel called Makor Rishon. And Uri had a very personal way of expressing his Zionism. Just like myself, he's a first generation born in Israel. Both his parents were born in Europe, and his grandparents were also born in Europe. And he had a tradition, and I'm going to share with you this tradition. I'm reading from a book that he wrote, and this is my favorite piece in this book, and every year I go back to this text. And people know me, I'm a little bit emotional, and many times I cry. I try not to do it this time. In the recent years, every year on Yom Ha'atzmaut, I go to Mount Scopus, and I go to meet my grandfather. My grandfather passed away many years ago, but I really want to share with him every year the State of the Union. I need to give him a report what his vision about the Zionist dream has become. When I go to Mount Scopus every year, there are Bnei Akiva students coming there wearing blue and white shirts, and they are dancing. And I sit and look at them. I sit on the porch in this beautiful, spectacular view of Jerusalem, and I tell him this. You know, grandfather, it's a bit complicated, this vision you had about the Jewish state. From the one hand, I see a beautiful Israeli flag there, and it's something you were praying for many years. But from the other hand, Jews are still murdered in terror attacks. From the one hand, Israel is a very strong state, but from the other hand, some people doubt the Zionism and the story of the Jewish people. And then, amazing thing happens in this imaginary scenario that Uri meets his grandfather. He said, suddenly, my grandfather is inviting his grandfather, and his grandfather is inviting his grandfather, and a club of all those grandpas is gathering together, and they are looking at him, and they're very much jealous. And then Uri says, suddenly, this whole report, they don't care about it. And all they care is just about one thing. And they're gathering together, and they're looking at me, and they're saying, how come that among all of us, the people that were praying for 2,000 years for a Jewish state, among all the rabbis in the tradition of the family, among all the scholars, among all the great people we had, among all the great people that were praying and crying, how come this grandchild is the only one who actually lives in a Jewish state? And Uri gets this hint of jealousy that all the grandpas have. And at this moment, I pause in the story. And I'm thinking about imaginary conversation that I would have had with my grandfathers back then in Soviet Georgia. And they would have said, you're complaining, huh? Well, think about living in a world where freedom of religion is not an option, where you can't send your kids to a Jewish school because there is no Jewish school. Think about a world where Jews cannot defend themselves. And then I'm thinking about, my husband, that is a grandson of a Holocaust survivor. He went through 13 different concentration camps. And sometimes, I know it's going to sound surprising, but even Ambassador and her husband have a political debate in the house. And when we have those arguments, I have one argument that I can always win with. I'm looking at him when he complains about different governments or about different politics, and I always have one winning answer. I'm always looking at him saying, well, I wonder what Saba Shmuel would have said. I wonder how he would have felt. Do you think he would have felt how privileged we are to have this argument about whether the state is good enough or not for us? Because he didn't have a state. And, we live in a generation where our grandparents are still with us, and they can tell us how the world looks without a Jewish state. So I want you to take with you this painting of Churchill, of Mount Scopus, almost empty. Think about Jerusalem today, full of people celebrating. And think about your grandparents. Make yourself a small grandpa's cabinet. Make yourself a small grandfather's club and talk to them. Have with them this imaginary conversation. And I know in this synagogue, I can't believe anyone has any criticism about Israel. No way. Definitely not this year. But I feel like today, more than ever, we need to make this a little bit of an instrumental story of going to the heights of Mount Scopus and inviting our ancestors and talking to them and having this dialogue and to see the jealousy in their eyes, to see how much they're jealous in the fact there is a Jewish state that is flourishing. There is a democratic Jewish state in Israel. And I want to tell another thing to my grandfather and my grandfather, because my grandfather, thank God, is still alive. I want to tell them, grandfather, you couldn't have imagined a world where Israel has peace with our world. But Israel has a peace with our world. And the Abraham Accords were signed. And I believe today, more countries are interested to be in alliance with Israel than in the past. And all those amazing miracles are happening. But we're a little bit missing them, aren't we? And I have in my mind a beautiful song written by one of the greatest, I think the greatest scholars Israel had. His name was Yehuda Amichai. I don't know if we can translate his poems because they're so powerful. And they speak about all the deep connection we have to Israel. But Yehuda Amichai has a beautiful poem called Miracles, Nisim. And then in this poem, he says something so beautiful that, please let me read it in Hebrew and I will translate. He said, Merachok, kol davar nira nes, aval mikarov, gam nes lo nira kach. כי אפילו מי שעבר בים סוף, ראה רק את הגב המזיע של מי שהלך לפניו. Such a beautiful song. It says that even people that went in the Red Sea, in the most glorious miracle the Jewish people ever had, they would have said, wait a second, there is someone in front of me that I don't like. Maybe it's getting too windy here. Miracles look great in perspective, but when we live our daily life, we forget them. Think about marriage, think about parenthood, think about all those great things, our private miracles we have. When we struggle in the daily life, we forget how miraculous they really are. And I want to finish just with this story, because I don't think I can stand here in Kinloss without mentioning the price. The Jewish state is marvelous, it's glorious, and it's a dream coming true of 2,000 years of generations praying, of all those grandfathers of Uriel Itzur, myself, or my husband, all the people sitting here. But there is a cost and there is a price. And just last Passover, I think the UK was shocked from the brutal murder of Lucy, Rina, and Mayadi. And last evening, both the chief rabbi and myself at Erev Yom HaZikaron, we were talking about them. There were so many powerful speeches that Rabbi D gave. And they were born and raised in this amazing community. The kids went to the school my kids go to. I know that they were part of St. John's Wood Synagogue. But I want to conclude with the most optimistic message I've ever heard from Rabbi D. When Rabbi D was asked in the first time how he keeps his emunah, and he said, some people have asked me, how can you have such a strong emunah, faith in God, after what happened today? So I told him I listened to Rabbi Goldberg's emunah shiurim that are available on the website. And there is just one thing I can tell you and share with you. There is one main formula for emunah. Always focus on what you do have and not on what you don't have. Such a simple thing, isn't it? And I think we have so much. We have a strong country, State of Israel. We have a strong bond between Israel and the Jewish world. This community is so much connected to Israel. We have future more than ever. And I truly believe that the next 75 years are going to be even better. But there is one condition to that, isn't it? The condition is the unity of the Israeli people. And I want to quote Rabbi D again. Rabbi D said at that day, this horrible day, today the Jewish people have proven that they are one. We are united, we are Am Echad. When a simple and quiet family from Efrat is devastated, the whole country hurts. And when a family in Tel Aviv is devastated, the whole country hurts. There is no greater proof of our unity. And he concluded, Am Yisrael Chai. Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach, Am Yisrael Chai.